today. This is our title. It's not easy to understand the content from the titles. I think you might have noticed. And AI applications, more or less, they might look similar, right? You have, I don't know, a RAG flow, image processing, text analysis, or forecasting demand for sales. But when you look at the details, go into the details, every AI use case is unique. And I think that's what makes AI a fun place to be. We don't get bored at all. Every time we learn something new. And hopefully you will also hear something new today. I would like to understand first, who is newest AI developer in the room? Or AI engineer? Anyone just started the journey? Great, great to have you. Nice. And we have some seasoned AI developers in the room that have been working in this space. You don't call yourself seasoned? Okay. Somewhere in between. That's cool. So I would like to welcome on stage our guest speaker. I'm very pleased to have him here today, Ben Jones from Motorway, to share his experience.
Thank you very much, Julie.
Welcome, Ben. Good to have you here.
Very formal.
So, Ben is the head of machine learning at Motorway, and we have been working with Motorway. I think the partnership between Google and Motorway goes back to 2021, I guess. Yeah. And since then, we collaborated on many projects, workshops, hackathons, and Ben and his team presented in our community meetup to share their experience. So it's really so nice to have you on stage to share your experience. Just to let the audience know, we will have some time at the end to get questions. So keep them coming towards the end. And I will be standing on this side to clear the view and asking some questions on your behalf on the way. But yeah, feel free to share more at the end.
Perfect.
Shall we start with an overview of Motorway?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, firstly, thanks very much, Tuba and to Google for having us. It's a real pleasure. Yeah, so let's start, shall we? Cool. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Motorway and how we've been using AI, notably Google's Gemini models, to revolutionize our business. First, though, it's probably useful to understand a little bit about Motorway. So just before I go over the numbers, a quick show of hands if you've heard of us. Ah, pretty good, pretty good. The brand spend, marketing spend's going well.
The black cab ads are helping a lot to me. I mean, I see them everywhere. Yeah.
I nearly get hit by one of them every now and again, and it's all a bit ironic. But yeah, so how many of you have actually used us before? Have you been to our site, maybe valued your car? A couple? Yeah? Has anyone actually sold your car through Motorway? Very good. A couple of hands there. Was it a good experience?
Yeah, it went very well.
Yeah? Excellent. That's always a bit of a risk, that one. So no, I'm glad to hear it. For those of you that haven't, this is not a sales pitch, but hopefully by the end of this, you might be inclined to think that we're a good place to sell your car. So what are we? So we are the UK's fastest growing used car marketplace. And we connect people who are wanting to sell their cars, so yourselves, for instance, to a pool of about 5,000 verified and trusted UK car dealers. Just a couple of the sort of key stats here. Last year we sold £2.2 billion worth of cars. That's quite a big number. What does that mean? It's about 500,000 people overall have sold their car the Motorway way, which is forever in my head after the radio adverts. So yeah, we're rated excellent on Trustpilot, and yeah, our team is I think more than 500 people now. So yeah, grown really rapidly over the last few years.
I saw the numbers from last year. It was like 400, I think. Now you say almost 500, quite a growth.
Yeah.
And also the numbers there, I think 30% growth at least. Looks quite good.
I think last time we presented these, was anybody at the Google Developers Conference last year, by the way? Did they hear us then? A couple of nods, yeah, very good. Cool, so last time I think it was 250,000.
And
so
you mentioned that you are hiring also, so we can get to that.
Get to that at the end if you're interested. So
I have been to this office, by the way. It's quite cool. They have very nice meeting room names. Lightning McQueen was my favorite. But it's quite nice to see those numbers. I just want to ask you, what is the differentiator of Motorway compared to other vendors in the market?
So that's a really good point. So compared to some of our friends who maybe buy any car, they're actually buying the car off you, right? So it's a different kind of model. We're not buying the car off you. We're there to facilitate the transaction between yourselves and car dealers. Ultimately, that makes for a really efficient marketplace. In fact, I'll go into a bit more detail after I've shown you a little bit about what the product is. So yeah, let's go ahead. So this is our website. If you haven't seen it before, this is what it looks like. And essentially, I'm going to show you what that journey looks like for a seller or for yourselves. You start very simply, head to our website, motivate.co.uk, and enter your vehicle registration. And within a few seconds, once you've given us your mileage, you'll get a valuation for your vehicle, something like this, right? For this lovely Range Rover Albio Sentinel V8A. And we think that's worth about £39,000 or so. But this price is just an estimate, like I said. Unlike some of our competitors, we're not buying the car off you. And because we facilitate that transaction, once we've sort of collected a bit of information, we verify a few details, identify damages, that kind of stuff, evidence of your record, we're putting that vehicle into an auction that looks a bit like this. And the idea is that this is better for you. That's the whole premise. That's the whole idea. Because your car's going straight to someone who actually really wants the vehicle. Unlike, say, if you were to part exchange it, where something like 90% of those cars that get part exchanged end up being re-auctioned anyway, normally at another auction site or an in-person auction. And so this is cutting out the middleman. And because we don't ever own the car, we can take super low margins. And so we're not incentivized to rip you off here. We're not incentivized to try and reduce your price like you would be any other way of selling your car. We're trying to find a balance between you and the dealer. And ultimately, that's why we think it's a good process. Cool. As a quick note, in case you're wondering why I picked that car, that's one of the prime ministerial Range Rovers. So that's what they're worth, if you're interested. So one of the perks of the job is just walking around London. That's 40,000, 20,000. You get a pretty good eye for it after a while. I think that's cool, but that's just me. OK, so this all sounds like maybe a good business model, or hopefully a good business model, except probably the part you're all thinking, or at least certainly the thing I was thinking before I joined, was how do you enable trust between sellers of their cars and dealers or buyers of the car?
Dealers don't see the cars, right? Before they...
They don't see the car before they bid on the car, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so building that trust between those two parties is crucial to making this work. It's the only thing that matters effectively. The way to get you the best price and get the dealer the best deal is that you understand the most that you can about the car. So how do we build that trust? Our mission, as it says, driven by customer focus and bold innovation to become the world's most trusted way to buy and sell cars. Building that trust in an industry that's traditionally very offline, very manual, kind of non-trusting, requires some innovations, and that's what I'm going to talk to you a little about today. So let's get on with it, shall we? Nice, AI. This is what we're all here for, right? So let's talk about a couple of the use cases. Our biggest use case, as I sort of alluded to earlier, is pricing vehicles. Ultimately, that is bread and butter of what we do. And these are really sort of heavy production use cases that we run straight out of BigQuery, running into Vertex AI, and have been doing so since our partnership with Google started. And it's really driven the business on from strength to strength. Getting this right is tricky. Every used vehicle is unique, and they've all got their own set of features, options, specification, condition, maintenance records. And if we set your expectation badly on the basis of these variables that are very hard to account for, you're going to be disappointed at the end of the process, or you're not going to go down the process with us at all. So setting that expectation right is really, really important. And we use machine learning at scale to do that using Vertex. Yeah. One of the other big use cases that we have is our computer vision models. And so it's really important for us that your profile looks as good as it can do. In fact, we're not competing with the likes of, say, Auto Trader in that sense. We're competing with professional auctions who will have professional photography for these vehicles to show them in a really good light. What I have noticed by looking at things like, say, Auto Trader or eBay Motors or Facebook Marketplace is that you lot can't be trusted to take your own photos. Yeah, it only takes a couple of seconds to have a look, and profiles
Let's say
can be...
they need some guidance.
Yes, sorry, yeah. And so what we have developed over the years is an understanding of what makes a really good profile, what makes that thing pop for our dealers, and allow them to have trust in the vehicle that they're buying, right? That imagery is really important to them. And so originally we'll be using a team of our human agents in our customer support centers, and they'd be reviewing all of the images to make sure that they sort of met our fairly strict standards for that. That's quite a lengthy process, and while it had really good results for our dealers, it's not great for you guys. You might be taking your photos at a certain time, let's say after work. You don't get some feedback on that until the next day. Maybe it's raining the next day, and the next thing you know, you've decided to sell your car elsewhere, right? So this is a super useful use case for us. We're taking, we've got about, I think, 19 computer vision models now running in production, behind the scenes, checking every aspect of your images, so checking that you've got 360-degree coverage of the exterior, checking that you've got good coverage of the interior of the vehicle as well, your alloys, any damage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been a real game changer for us. It gives you real-time feedback on those photos such that you can take them in the best quality. And
So all these things here you're showing, like keep the whole car visible, keep those fingers clear. I like that one. So that's real time happening while the customers are taking the pictures as a feedback. That's
exactly,
nice.
yeah. So for those of you that have been through the journey for us, hopefully you'll have experienced this. But the idea is that we give you some guidance, and if you can't quite make it, we'll give you some additional feedback on those photos and encourage that you retake them. And the result of that is that our profiles look really good, I think, and it's one of the distinguishing factors between us and some of our competitors. Awesome. We do some other things as well. So we do some bespoke recommendations, again in Vertex AI. And we also do some logistics optimization, which is one of those things that I could talk about all day, but will have varying interest to different parts of the audience here. But I won't talk about it too much now. Topic for another time. Broadly speaking, it's a complicated problem, and it's really interesting from an AI point of view.
So where is Gen AI? Yeah, that would be my question.
So
you cannot leave the session without a Gen AI topic, right? That's a must. So.
Absolutely. As mentioned in this morning's keynote, I think they said there's no AI these days without Gen AI, and such is the case here, right? So those are all traditional machine learning use cases. I use the word traditional. They were cutting edge 2 years ago, and now I call them traditional. But yeah, so what are we doing in Gen AI? Cool. I'm going to talk through with you today the use case that we have around service history documentation. So you might be thinking, oh, no, not another document processing example. Actually, I hope to convince you that this is one of the most interesting document processing cases that you'll see, certainly most interesting one that I've seen, also the most challenging. So what is it? What's the problem? Service history documents. So just a quick show of hands. Who here is currently owning a car or has owned a car in the past? Okay, good number of you, but also a good number of you that haven't. So a service history is basically a record of the vehicle's maintenance or service schedule over the course of its life. And it's really important to the vehicle value. So we see from our auctions that it makes a difference of about 20% or so, a car that's been really well maintained to one that hasn't. And that makes sense, right? Now, when we see the car at the beginning, we don't know what the maintenance record of that car is. And when you provide that to us, it's really hard for us to extract that information. And as you can see on the left here, these are the kinds of things that demonstrate service history on a vehicle. It could be anything from a photo of a dashboard in the car, it could be a screenshot of of a web page, or often it's documents, invoices, or logbooks with stamps and handwriting. It's probably the worst OCR case that I've ever seen in my 8-year career in machine learning, and except for maybe doctors' handwritten patient notes, which is also traditionally very difficult. But there's a lot of things that I have to try and solve here. I'm going to stop that because it's a bit distracting. Yeah, and to make matters worse, we find that service history is not also well understood by sellers of their vehicle as well. Certain people have different understanding about what that means and what the ultimate definition is around classifying that car as having a full service record, so full service history, or a partial service record, or no service record. So because it's so important to your value of your vehicle, we've had our team of agents in our customer support center be classifying these documents, collecting them together, identifying these things for a number of years now. And we provide dealers with that information up front so that they can really easily make decisions about what they think that car is worth and how they can bid on that confidently. Again, all of that contributing to trust. So where am I going with this? Obviously, that's a really tedious, arduous task. If you ask our agents, it's the one they hate most. And so it's prime time we did something about that, right? So, nice. So what are we doing? So we go through a multi-stage process here. If I could just throw this into one of those nice multimodal models and get the answer, that'd be excellent. But unfortunately, that doesn't work. Trust us, we've
That's
tried
what
it.
I mean by every use case is unique, really, when you get to the details, yeah.
Absolutely. And so instead of that, we've had to come up with a kind of bespoke process for processing these documents. So we've broken this down into stages that our human agents are doing implicitly. And this is probably a bit of a distinction from traditional machine learning in the sense that now large language models are capable of doing that human reasoning in the same way that a human might have done it. And that's been really powerful. So broadly speaking, what are we doing? From the very top, we're flagging for things like excessive blurring. People take awful quality photos at times. Maybe they put their finger over the lens. Maybe it's over or underexposed and we can't make out the details. We're also identifying how many pages are present. Sometimes you get, quite amusingly, people would just throw all the documents down and take one photo of them all, and so that's quite a challenge. Traditionally, that would pass. So we're like, yes, this is a document, but it's not useful, right? So now we can identify how many pages are on the screen, and is it too many for us to be able to identify? We extract the text for each spatial block and identify how many events are on each page, categorize that document into a various number of categories, including ones that are useful to us and ones that may be not so useful to us.
And when you mean events, what kind of events? Is it like the visit to the service station? Or?
Exactly, yeah. So a service event is effectively when you take your car to a garage. It should happen about once every 12 months or every 10,000 miles or so. It does vary depending on the manufacturer of the vehicle and sometimes the model, which makes it also quite complicated. But broadly speaking, yes. So it's things like having your oil changed on your car. It's things like getting an inspection across your brakes and other things about cars that I'm at the limit of my knowledge of, clearly. But yeah, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about that event occurring. When did it occur? What mileage did it occur at? And what date did it occur at? Those things all compromise its contribution towards that car having a full service record or partial or no. It's a lot of work, broadly speaking, is what I'm trying to get to. It's a lot of work. So how do we go about it? So one of our first stages is that we're segmenting that vehicle up, as I said, into the number of pages, that image up into the number of pages that we see and the number of service records that we can see. So here, this is a classic example of the sort of thing you might find. It's, like I said, it's horrible. It's stamped. There's handwriting on it on different angles. In fact, this is not one of the worst ones because it's at least structured in the sense that there are, we can clearly see how many events there are here.
There are at least documents also.
Pardon?
There are at least some documents, not like some random images you might show later. Yeah.
Yes. So in this case, we can make sense of this, and we can pass this through. So we can extract the different items and pass those through individually. For those of you that are interested, we're using ResNet 50 image classification models to classify the documents themselves. So into whether or not maybe this is an invoice or it's a logbook or it's a screenshot of the dashboard, in which case we have to do different processing flows for that. Cool. So here's, what am I talking about? Here's a really good example.
They look quite identical to me.
One of the hardest problems to solve is this one, in that both of these are invoices for maintenance work on the vehicle, except the one on the left is a full service, and the one on the right is not. I don't know if I, at a glance, could tell that very easily, and our human agents also sometimes struggle with this problem. I certainly would. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the distinction is here, and then how we go about solving that problem. So on the left, we can see this is specifically what we're looking for: carry out service. That tells me now definitively that that was a service history, or a record of service history, whereas the other one is an invoice for some repair or something like this that doesn't constitute a service. What we're also looking for to identify is the date that it happened on and the mileage that it happened at. These could be scattered across the page in different areas. Sometimes multiple things could happen on the same day, so they might have also carried out other maintenance work as well as the service, and so you have to distinguish all of those things. Now, traditional OCR methods do sometimes work for this kind of stuff, but there's a reasoning element to this that really you need to identify. It doesn't always say service carried out. It might say different words, right? And before using regex or sort of conditional-based approach, it's very challenging. Now, this is a real example. This is exactly what we pull out, and these are the important details that we're looking for. So we're looking for the date. Is it actually a service record? The mileage? Where was the service done? And which items were applied? Yeah, and we do this with the power of Gemini, which I think I'm supposed to say. It's a phrase you've heard a lot today, but it's true.
To mention, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. This is another good example, right? So that other document, this is what we're looking for. We're trying to say this is not a valid example. If we can tell the seller that immediately in the moment, they know then that, okay, this isn't what I was looking for. I can send this one instead, and we end up with a much lower friction process for the sellers, and ultimately more trust in the documents for dealers. Okay, one of the tough things about large language models, and I think for those of you that have been developing with them, is evaluating why they're failing or why they're not working. Because unlike an if statement or a unit test, they're non-deterministic. They do all kinds of things sometimes, and that's difficult.
And they are large, very large models to explain.
They're very large. So one of the ways that we do this at Motorway, and I think is useful for us to talk about with you all here, is we use an AI observability tool called Arise, which is purchased through the Google Marketplace, which enables us to understand the specific areas in an embedding space where our models are not performing well. So you can see these sort of clusters of classifications here, and you can see some of them overlap a little bit. And that's basically telling us that, okay, where the model has determined something, it's not maybe quite as the other things should look. And if we have a look at what those look like, these are the kinds of things that you send to us instead of service history documents. Some shoes, some keys, a beer.
That's my favorite.
A cat.
And this.
We have thought about cat detection models in the past, but yeah. So this is what we found, is that, doing this sort of stuff at scale is challenging, and you don't always find the trends in why your models aren't working. When you have something like this, it's easy to find trends about why it isn't working. In this case, we hadn't set the large language model up to identify or process keys, cats, shoes, beers.
And Ben, when you do the evaluation, do you also notice things that were human error? Like they were correct, maybe the model is saying something, but human is the one that was giving the wrong decision. Yeah, so this is a really important point. I mean, finding that ground truth information is vital. And if you've got agents, like in our case, or you've got people who are reviewing, they are essential, but not completely everything that you need to get to the best result, right? You also need to take what they've produced, identify where they've maybe where the two disagree, and then make that judgment again. So broadly speaking, we call that model-assisted labeling or model-assisted learning. Yeah. And that's the best way, I think, to get to those sort of really high levels of accuracy that we need when we're trying to sell what is, for most people, their second most valuable asset, or most valuable asset if you don't own a house, like most of us in London. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, really good question, Shiva. Cool. So let's get to the point. What does it produce? This is the output. And this is live in production right now. This is live in production right now. So we use this for every vehicle that comes through, where we get those service record images. You can see them on the bottom there.
what we're producing at the moment is a sort of smart suggest feature for our agents. And so for every vehicle that they see, we're going to suggest what we think that classification was and how many records it had. Now, one of the other big learnings that I think is valuable is that if you have this setup, you should use it. If you have agents, you should use them, because going straight to your seller or straight to your user can be fraught with risk. If you can validate that this is working in a lower risk environment that still adds value to the business, you can incrementally get not just better performance and buy-in, not just better performance, but also buy-in from the business. So you can go incrementally towards that rollout without having to go in one big go. This has been a huge success for us. So what is the impact? I mean, we've got a 72% agreement with our human agents. To your point before, Tuba,
yeah.
This number is not accuracy, and there's a reason for that.
Why agreement? Yeah. I like that. Agreement is a good word. Not statistically just the same thing as accuracy, I see.
Yeah. So the reason that we've been quite careful with the wording here is that sometimes we're both correct, or we both agree, and most of the time we're both correct. Sometimes we disagree, and the human agent is, of course, correct. And occasionally we disagree, and we were correct in that example. And so finding actually the true number there is quite challenging. The number I can give you, though, is 72% of the time we agree. We would like to get that number up, but we also, what I'm saying here is that 100% accuracy or 100% agreement is maybe not what you're looking for, right? And that's really important for you to, or it's a good important learning for us along that process. And in testing, we're looking at about a 96% reduction in time to serve versus human intervention. That makes sense, of course. It takes a long time for our agents to get to these things, or even if they get into them very quickly, it's within business hours, et cetera. It can be the next day before that interaction between agent and seller goes ahead. So really, really important stuff when we do it well.
And it's a very wise thing to do, I think, what you mentioned there, to test the implementation in real environment, but if possible with a controlled community like the sellers, the dealers in this case, the agents in this case, before we get to the customer-facing application. Because we learn a lot from the real implementations, but especially with new applications like Gen AI, we are still testing the waters, and it's always good to keep it a bit safe within our own internal people or customers, internal customers. But do you plan to take it one step further and make it more customer-facing?
Good question, Jiva. So probably a good time to go on to what's next. So what are we looking to do to expand this? Of course, there's lots of things that we can do and lots of things that we're testing right now. So naturally, the first one, as we talked about, is going from agents to sellers, giving it directly and putting it in their hands and giving them the ability to validate the suggestion that we've made. Maybe converse with us if they disagree with the point, and then allow them to proceed immediately without needing to go through that agent intervention.
Latency will be quite important then, right? It's going to be real time.
Absolutely, yeah. So latency is important. If you're spending 10, 15 seconds waiting to process this, people switch off your app and maybe don't come back. So latency is super important. We'll come back to that in a little bit. And so the other things that we're looking to do, of course, it can make a difference if those services happen at a main dealer or an independent dealer. The nuances maybe, it doesn't feel so important to me or to us, but to our dealers it does make a difference. And identifying which of those garages were main and which is independent is typically a job that is done by taking the address, typing it into Google, hitting search, and then going on the website and seeing, does this look like a main dealer website? Maybe going to Google Maps and looking at the street view and saying, oh, that does look like a main dealer franchise. Yes, I'm going to classify that as a main dealer. We can also look it up against a catalog of known dealers, but the independent ones, again, it's not perfect. So this is a process, again, traditionally off limits to us and no longer. So using agentic grounded search or Google search, you can determine that without needing humans to go through that process. And using chain of thought reasoning. So providing a rationale for the decision. Right now, we say we think it was a partial service history, but we don't tell you why. And when we get more confident with that reasoning, we want to show it directly to the seller. So you can see it on the left here. this is the kind of thing that we like to show, something like, this vehicle has had one critical service interval between this period, and that gap is longer than it should have been over the 12 months. And therefore, we declassified this as partial service history, and that's going to affect your price a little bit. That sets your expectation a little bit better. It means that the dealers have a better expectation, a better understanding of the vehicle, and ultimately, we meet in the middle at the best price. We can also talk about warranty. So service history affects the warranty. I should have mentioned that earlier. And that's really important, right? If you've got a car the warranty has become invalid, that again affects your price. Cool.
That's the best part.
Yeah. The lessons learned. So I'm going to try and give you some really, or maybe just 3 of the most important things that we came up against and I think would be useful to you if you were to do something similar. In our case, number 1 is that multimodal LLMs, while they have a lot of promise, they weren't enough to solve it out of the box. And it's quite easy at that point just to give up and say, large language models, they're not good. They're not good enough. They don't replace AI agents, and that's it. That's the end. We didn't give up. By combining things like segmentation, so classic computer vision techniques, segmentation, detection, traditional OCR, as well as large language models, that combination of all of it is what's given us this breakthrough to be able to achieve these kinds of results and will enable us to continue to achieve these kinds of results in this and other use cases. The other thing I think, I don't see this very often, but this is really important. So most of you, well, hands up if you've heard of chain of thought reasoning. Okay, yeah, over half, yeah. So just as a quick example, chain of thought is asking the large language model to explain itself before giving you the answer. It's a really stupidly simple technique, but it does add a lot of value to the performance of those models. And when we're interfacing in chat, we often say things like, explain your thoughts, or think step by step. And then as soon as we go and ask for a JSON response, we don't do it anymore. And we lose that power that you had in the chain of thought reasoning because we're asking for structured output in JSON. So, or what is common, in fact, and what we were doing was asking it to produce, and this is very normal, a natural sort of human way of doing it, is to give a price or to give the output, give a classification, and then explain why you gave the price or that output. And that's really common. In fact, that's how we were doing it for a while. What's more useful is if you ask the large language model to explain it first, then give you the classification afterwards, or the price, or whatever it is you're trying to get. The large language model is able to benefit from the autoaggressive nature of the words it's already produced to give you a better output later on, and you find better accuracy that way. Yeah, the last thing I think I'll probably point on is robust evaluation. So, like I said earlier, one of the hardest things about these is evaluating how performant they are and where they're falling down. In the past, we noticed, in particular, sort of earlier, like text Bison models or other models from other parties, they perform better when you repeated your instructions. So you might have quite a large prompt, and you would say a couple of times, I want you to do this thing. And then a bit later on, you might say, I want you to do this thing again. And that sort of reinforcement would force them to do the thing. These days, we find Gemini prefers concise prompts with clear, direct instructions. This sounds like quite a simple thing for me to say, but how you determine this is better is by having really robust evaluations, being able to identify how does this model, how does this prompt, how does this version compare to the previous ones that I had, overall with good grounded data. So having that set up enables you to make these kinds of things for yourself, these sort of revelations for yourself in the same way that we did.
That's a very good point. It's not only about comparing side by side the models, but also the prompts and all the different variations. And we can do that in Vertex AI and visualize it easily. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And one thing I didn't put on here, but I think is really important, and you've reminded me of it, Tuba, is that because those prompts are so important, I'm not saying everybody should go out and hire prompt engineers. We don't have prompt engineers. But what I think really is important is just interact with these models, get an intuition for how they respond and how they like to be asked, because that makes a big difference in your ability to engineer those prompts effectively.
Yeah. And there's also a new feature in Vertex AI released only a couple of weeks ago. It's the prompt optimizer. So you will be able to write a prompt and then get the response, and you don't like something about it or something is missing. It asks you, how would you like to improve this prompt? You type what you want, and it recreates the prompt for you. So those kind of learnings will be much easier. Like you said, you don't need to hire new people just for prompt engineering, but the tool will be able to enable you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tuba, I think it'd be good if you could show us that at some point.
Yeah. Next time. Yeah.
Cool. So, yeah, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for listening. I think, well, firstly, I should just say we are hiring. So if any of this was interesting to you, please come find me afterwards because there's lots of exciting stuff going on. We'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to hear about ask any other questions or get in touch.
Ben, you just forgot about saying one thing. Why Google?
Ah, yes.
I mean, I know it's amazing customer engineering and account team support. That's taken for granted, obvious. But what else?
Yeah, okay, so why Google? Obviously, there's lots of providers available to all of us. We chose Google as our as our AI partner. I think being really honest, the first reason is just that enterprise-grade protection that we've probably talked about 4 times already today. But that really it made it really easy on the basis that our data is already in Google. We know that data is safe and secure and it's not being passed around the internet to third parties that we don't necessarily trust. That made it really easy to keep our legal team happy, and that's really important if you're doing this kind of stuff, particularly if in a regulated environment. Keeping your legal team happy makes everything else much simpler. So that was number 1. Number 2, personally, I think Google's first-party models give it that advantage because, one, they're continually working on Gemini, making it better, improving it, reducing the latency, but also that ecosystem as it sort of permeates across Google Cloud. Because they have that ownership of that model, Google is able to do things across the ecosystem that other people aren't able to do quite so easily. A really good example of that for us was Google was the first, I think, to produce prompt caching, which can reduce your costs quite significantly. Google was able to do that, and I think, in my view, broadly speaking, because they own the whole thing, first party end to end, right? So makes it really useful. The third thing is just how easy it is in Vertex AI. I know it sounds a bit salesy now, but it is genuinely really easy to get started in Vertex with this kind of stuff. It's not very intimidating. I can put this out to my software engineers and give them a go. They can try it, build something really quickly. And so that combination makes it quite easy to start. And once you've got the ball rolling, you've got the intuition built, people start thinking themselves about how they can build useful things. And that's how you ultimately end up with productionized use cases like these, is people with ideas that try them, build them, and get to this point. So a big credit to the team for doing that.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, feel free to contact Ben if you know someone that is looking for a job or you are looking for a change. And we have some time for questions now. Oh, amazing. We have one gentleman in the front. Yep. We have the mic coming. Here you go.
Is there anything you do about the mechanical condition of the vehicle? So maybe the engine's making a funny noise or the clutch is slipping. How's that taken into the process?
I love this question. It's a great question.
Yeah, very good question.
If Google is kind enough, we'll come back and do a talk on that at another time. We're doing a lot in this space, naturally. It's it's another really important part of how you price the vehicle, that sort of mechanical condition of the vehicle.
The sound of the machine, like the engine, yeah.
How the engine is working, etc. And so we are using generative AI in that space as well to understand from a free text field what is wrong with the vehicle, classify that, or clarify any things that we don't understand, and then ultimately give a price back for what we think that would affect the vehicle's value by. So that is all ongoing, and yeah, if we're invited back, we'll definitely talk about that at some point.
Yep. Good question.
Thank you for a great talk. Really enjoyed it because I'm a bit of a petrolhead. Is there a gap in the market for doing similar things with motorcycles?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the answer is yes. One of the things that's been really exciting at Motorway that we're doing recently, Motorway was set up for cars originally, and we set it up in a way that we didn't really think about other use cases. And motorcycles is a great example. Motorhomes is a good example. I think Harry talked about boats at one point. Harry's our co-founder. There's all sorts of things that we could apply the same model to. One of the things that we're using is trying to use AI to make our profiling journey, so that's getting the profile complete from the point that you start the journey with us to the point that it goes into the auction, making that a bit more flexible, making it a bit easier to accommodate for other use cases. So we're using Gemini for that as well. That's very early stages, but absolutely, like these kinds of innovations enable us to approach other markets a little bit easier.
Good. We have one.
Yeah. Hi.
Oh, okay.
Was cost a concern, or like what did you do to kind of manage the cost, or like if you can give us some insights? Did you build any dashboards, or how were you monitoring it? And
Yeah, good question. So there's two parts to this question. One, yeah, cost is of course important, and we do monitor that in dashboards in Google Cloud. I would say, though, my advice is that while cost is something you need to factor in, the cost is coming down all the time. The cost of, I don't know about Google, but I think our account manager
Cost of Gemini is usually dropping almost every month now.
Our account manager is not so happy every time that release comes out, but we're delighted. I think they've come down about 1,000 times over the last 12 months, broadly speaking, the cost of large language models. Maybe it's 18 months, something like that. That's the figure. So even if your use case is netting out about neutral now, or even if it's costing you a little bit more than it was before, you can be pretty confident that that is going to keep coming down and that you're going to be ahead of the curve when that happens. So yeah, it's a really good question, but I think it's not something that has massively concerned us. The other part of it, the second part I was going to say, is that we do have, we're dealing with very expensive assets here. Like I said, second most valuable or most valuable asset for a lot of people. So we can we're fortunate in that case. We can put a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of investment into each and every one of those profiles to give it the best possible chance in ways that maybe other businesses can't do quite so much. So yeah, thanks for the question. Anyone
One last question, maybe.
Hi, thank you for the talk. How often do you have to deal with the people who upload pictures of fake service histories or generated pictures or something like this? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Good question. Yeah.
It doesn't happen very often.
Or maybe you don't know.
Maybe we don't know how often it happens.
They were so good.
Broadly speaking, our dealers tell us when we get that wrong. They have a very vested interest in telling us that. It doesn't happen that often. Where it does happen, we have to draw the line in our business between how much responsibility that we can take in this case and how much responsibility the seller has to take. That's ultimately fraud, and where we do identify it, we do go down those relevant channels. But where it's identified at a later point, ultimately, it's the same as selling a car in any other aspect and lying about it. I think some of the level of detail that we do go to in our process discourages this kind of thing. I think it's a lot easier to say on AutoTrader, for example, not to sully their good name, but it's easy to say full service history and just type it in a free text field. It's a bit harder when you're asked then to go and upload the photos and then to verify that we've correctly taken each of the things, because it gives you the sense that you are going to be examined on that. So I think it does help. It's a strength of our model, but you're never going to get rid of it totally. Perfect.
Thank you so much. I think
Thanks very much, everyone.
the end
Yeah.
of the talk. Yeah.